Hello everybody, Michael here for Tactica Imperialis with a Xaupatec Belt campaign video. Today I am taking a look at the background of my Imperial Guard General. I want to call this a story time video, but I get the feeling I'll be treading on somebody's toes. So this is a background video for my Imperial Guard General, who has worked his way up through the ranks to lead the Paragonian 11th Regiment. Now this guy's name is Gaius Servax. He was an underhiver who was born on the world of Paragon, which is a pretty decent world to work on, although as a hive worker their standards weren't amazing, but by Imperial standards not so bad, I suppose. Paragon seems like a decent enough world from what I've read. And he enlisted in the Imperial Guard Astra Militarum during one of the raisings back in late M41, sorry. About 900 M41, maybe a little, no, not 900, about 950 M41. My maths is gone. And he obviously joined and was assigned to the Paragonian 11th. And he was put, eventually, after working his way through training, through guardsman squads, he was put on the Vox for his infantry squad because of the fact he was very loud. He could relay orders very well that were issued by platoon commanders. If the Vox was not loud enough, he could just bark it out, and he had a knack with machines. Now, as an underhiver, he obviously had a bit of work in machinery, and he got quite good at keeping the machine spirits of the Vox on side, because sometimes the Vox can get quite temperamental, and sometimes you might get static, but he was quite good at overcoming these problems and making sure the orders were delivered. Eventually, after about 5 years on the line, he was promoted to platoon command under Lieutenant Weissman. And Lieutenant Weissman was pretty well renowned, maybe not the loudest though. So, again, Gaius was placed on the Vox to bark out the orders just because his commander wasn't that loud. And eventually, on a campaign against the Orcs in Segmentum Solar, Weissman caught a slug around to the head, unfortunately, meaning that he was at the time incapacitated, but he was pronounced dead later in the Medicae facility. Now, with his commander out of action, you might think that platoon structure might fall apart. Thankfully, this guy was around, and what he did was, because he had the Vox and he had a loud voice, and having observed Weissman for a while, he thought he'd try and at least maintain a semblance of order by giving out a few orders, just like hold the line here or advance here. Nothing major, just little stuff for his platoon. Obviously relaying company command orders, but also having a go at just trying to keep his platoon in line. And it worked. So the line held, and eventually the Orcs were repelled for the time being. And after discussion amongst the platoon sort of, maybe not overruled everybody, but asked him to take command of the platoon, at least until an official one was found by the regiment command, or by the administratum, or the ministorum, or whoever was in charge of sorting out that. And so he was, at least for a time, raised to platoon command, which was good. Eventually, after a few more years, probably another 5 as platoon command, he comes up into senior command. He works his way in through the command structure, sitting on tactical meetings, giving advice, taking advice, and relaying these orders to his men. And he got quite good at this. For a time, he refused to give up his Vox, but eventually he had to pass it on so as he could keep his brain working around everything that's going on around him. Eventually, after the general of the Paragonian 11th retired, he was then elected, or chosen by the commissariat, or whoever does it, to become the general of the Paragonian 11th. And his first action, he crushes a civilian uprising in the Kaisan sector, which is in Segmentum Tempestus, I believe it's called. I've not got a map in front of me. He goes on to distinguish himself against a variety of foes, because as an Imperial Guardsman on the line, you will obviously face a wide variety of enemies. And his preferred enemy was the Tau, because he had served for a while on the Eastern Fringe while he was in platoon command, and he got good at fighting Tau. Maybe not to the point of he understood how they worked, because I don't think the Imperium quite understands how the Tau civilization works. But he got a decent understanding of their militaristic tactics, if nothing else. So he became pretty renowned for his abilities against the Tau. He had worked with them once in a battle on the Eastern Fringe against the Tyranids, I do not believe he was there when Caiaphas Cain fought alongside the Tau, but this was a separate incident entirely, alongside Borkan Sept. And eventually, he is deployed to the world of Delos, an agri-world, which is in Segmentum Obscurus, which I believe is where the Eastern Fringe is located. I could be wrong, again I don't have a map to hand. And he's against the forces of Chasso Fortal, who are obviously a Tau force, who have worked their way into the planet's hierarchy using the watercast. So instead of taking this agri-world over and potentially blasting its resources to ruin, the Tau have gone through subtle negotiations with the watercast, talking to the planetary governor and everybody else, and have sort of wormed their way in. So there are now Tau militia regiments, there are mixed Tau human regiments, I believe they're known as Gala regiments, and of course there are some pure human platoons. There is a small resistance against this, but it's very insignificant for a planet of this size. It's a very large planet, and whilst there may be some disturbances in the hives, it's nothing really on the scale of the Imperium, or any uprising instigated by chaos. So, Servax makes ground, takes planetfall, and originally the watercast actually come out to negotiate, see if they can negotiate a deal to perhaps allow the Tau to leave peacefully, or perhaps to do some planet sharing, resource sharing, or whatever. Perhaps try and win over Servax and the Paragonians to the greater good. These negotiations broke down after a couple of days because of, well, officially it was an accident. What happened was the Primaris Psyker attached to the regiment suffered a psychic attack. The official statement may go on to say that he was attacked by a demon and was then killed by the Commissar, because that's what Commissars do. But before the Commissar could pull his bolt pistol out, because the Commissar was being a little bit lax, the bolt speared out of the Primaris Psyker and took the Watercast negotiator in the chest and sort of not quite detonated him, but you understand what I'm saying. Now, officially this goes down as an accident. What had actually happened was that the Commissar had threatened to shoot the Psyker if he didn't take out the negotiator, but the Commissar, having to make it look like an accident, shot him anyway, saying it's for your own good, as the Commissariat now does. So the Primaris Psyker kills the Watercast and is then executed by the Commissar, despite the fact that it was instigated by the Commissar in the first place, because he viewed the Tau as unclean and should not be treated with. He was very close to executing Servax, but the fact negotiations hadn't got very far meant that he was restrained for now. And now all-out war erupts. The Tau realise that the Imperial Guard are not to be reasoned with. They are to be exterminated. And if they can show the error of the Imperial Guard ways to the local population, these uprisings may stop, and the whole world can be taken over for the greater good into, I think it was Viola Sept, as it was. And this was actually quite a balanced war, because Fortal was pretty well experienced fighting the Imperium. After all, there had been some early skirmishes on Delos, and he'd also fought against them during the Dalith Crusade. No, not Dalith Crusade, the Damocles Gulf Crusade. Only briefly as a fire warrior, but he had fought against them before, and as he worked his way up through the ranks, he did a lot of studying using Pure Tide's teachings against the Imperium. He also was quite a fan of Shadow Sun and Farsight, though as a Viola Sept commander, his allegiance still was partly with Oshova. Anyway, the war is quite balanced. For every counter-assault and counter-gambit that the two forces play, many are cancelled out. Ground is made, the Imperial Guard establish a beachhead and begin to take over a couple of hives and a couple of farmsteads, but at the moment the Tau still hold the majority of the world because, well, it's not going well. But these farms that have been taken over and these hives are actually where the rebellion are located. Servax chose his attacks carefully. And now using this, he used the Ministorum and the Commissariat to rouse up this population and get them to transmit messages to other hives, speaking of the error of the Tau's ways and how they speak in riddles and will only serve no master and will turn you against the God Emperor, who is the greatest leader of all, and all the propaganda blah-de-blah-de-blah that you get out of the Imperium these days. So it's It's not very effective, but it's enough. So some of the other hives start to have grumblings, and the town now have to slightly turn their head inwards. A lot of the Gala regiments are pulled off the front lines in order to deal with these uprisings, meaning that the town numbers are greatly reduced, because Gala are the main fighting force. And at this point, Gaius launches his next set of attacks. Now, as an underhiver, it's very dark in the underhives and in the factories in many worlds. And so, low light vision was something that many Paragonian underhivers had. And Gaius sought to exploit this, and he did. He often attacked at dawn or during the night with stealth forces, and during the day he would often commit all-out attacks, as you would expect, but in low light he was actually very, very skilled, to the point where he had optic augmetics put in to give him pretty much night vision. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't quite on the level of Black Sun technology that the Tau were using, but it was a good mock-up from salvaged Black Sun technology. And using these raids, many of the hives are now at the very least contested. It's not overwhelmingly going the Guards' way, but it is starting to tilt the Guards' way. And Delos has a slightly weird cycle. Eclipses are not uncommon on Delos, because there are two moons on different orbits. One goes, around north to south, the other goes east to west, and that means that sometimes they can intercept each other. In fact, they intercept each other very often, and because there's two of them, it is quite common for solar eclipses. I mean, it's not more than once a year, but at least a couple times a decade there is a solar eclipse, and a couple more times a decade there is a lunar eclipse. And it so happened that there was a solar eclipse during this engagement. And because of the slow orbit, this meant that Gaius had about 2 days of this eclipse. And he took it to full advantage, using his low-light augmetics and the low-light abilities of his soldiers. He committed to an all-out attack on the coalition centre. Many of the hives were not abandoned, but had many troops pulled out after they had been sort of won over. The Gala had been either converted to penal legion or conscripts, or downright exterminated, depending on who was in charge. And he led the final assault. He's now in his 70s at this point, so he's not exactly a frontline fighter. He can fight with a pistol and his ceremonial sword, but he's nothing amazing in a fight, so he often commands from his chimera in the back ranks, barking out orders, and this is why he owns the tactical auto-reliquary, allowing to issue more orders more effectively. And as a result, this all-out night raid, almost, works. The Lehman Russes and Basilisk artillery bombard many of the barracks and vehicle depots of the Tau. Most of them are, at the very least, damaged to the point where deployment is difficult. A couple are outright destroyed. The Chateau Fortal is in talks with the Ethereal about withdrawing, because they can see now that the Guard have an advantage. They can see they can't hold Delos. They may as well retreat, reinforce, and then come back and cleanse the Guardsmen off at a later date. This night raid caught them out during this meeting. So Fortal obviously is out of position, but he's still well equipped. Him and his bodyguards come to the front at the coalition centre and make up the last stand. And eventually, the Guard win. And the local population who had been captured by the town were being used as part of the Gala, who perhaps were a little bit less willing. For example, they had been conscripted by higher-ranking members of Delosian society or whatever, had a certain awe now, because they were very impressed with this off-worlder who had come in and defeated the Tau so amazing. It had taken him a year to do it, but he had done it pretty damn quickly by Imperial standards. And so they honoured him with the moniker of Solnoir, because he had done it during an eclipse, and Solnoir is a loose translation from French of Black Sun. So when the sun turned black because of the eclipse, he launched his final attack and he won, and so the moniker Solnoir was given to him by the locals. And he actually took that. So instead of being Gaius Servax, he took the name Gaius Solnoir, alluding to his low-light skills. He then managed to find a fully working Black Sun filter, and after clearing it with the Mechanicus, who were with him, he had it installed as his new augmetics, and now he actually has full night vision. And yeah, Fort Tower was taken out, the Ethereal was evacuated, but Fort Tower was killed, and the Imperium celebrated bringing Delos back into the fold, and eventually the Tower had been pursued out of system by Paragonians, Mordians, and I think there was a detachment from Bacca as well, who have pursued the Tower out of system for now. And so now Solnoir is redeployed, and he is now in the Xaupatec Belt because of his Tau fighting knowledge and skills, the fact that they are what you might call his preferred enemy, which is why his warlord trait reflects this. He has preferred enemy, and so does his command squad, who are all veterans of the Delosian War. And that is his story up to now. His story, of course, will evolve and develop as the Xaupatec Belt campaign continues. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to leave a like if you did. Comment for who you'd like to see next. I'm planning to do Ben's Chaos Commander next, Void Reaper, but I'm not sure. So thank you for watching. My name is Michael, and I will see you again.